In this video, I'm sharing 10 creative ways you can use decoupage to create some unique ornaments this holiday season. First up, let's start with a wood applique. Now, make sure your wood applique does have a flat surface or flat-ish, and this one's pretty large. It's about 8 inches. We're then going to take some white paint and put a nice base on here. I'm using chalk paint. Feel free to use whatever white paint you would like. This is going to help our decoupage to pop. For the decoupage portion, we're going to be using my own TDS Creative Decoupage tissue paper. This is called Nature in Winter. I'm just going to cut out this little section and trim it down to size to fit that center of our wood applique. And to get that exact design, I'm just taking my nail and digging it on in that crease and then trimming it out with a pair of scissors. For medium, I'm just going to take some good old Mod Podge and one of my TDS Creative artist brushes in the fan style for our application process. Now, you don't need a lot of medium whenever you're using this tissue paper. A little will do, but if you do use too much, it's fair to say it's going to squeeze out around the edges and you can just wipe it right on off. Now, I do like to take a little bit of water from my water bottle and give it a little spritz on the back of the tissue paper. It just helps make it a little bit more manipulatable for you to press it down and get a good connection. You do not have to spray this with the water bottle if you do not want. You can absolutely apply the tissue paper dry and still get an amazing finish. The good thing about using tissue paper is if you mess up, like how I laid it down here and it wasn't exactly in the center, you can use your fingers and gently move it around. Once that was dry, I grabbed some of my antique Waverly wax and a baby wipe. You could use your finger. You see me use my finger here too. Use whatever you want, people. We're just taking some, going around the edges of our ornament and rusticking it on up, you know, helping those beautiful ornate designs to pop on this piece. Then I decided to take a little tiny paintbrush with some of the same white paint we put our base on and go around just, you know, trimming it up, making sure that that decoupage looks nice. And I did take a little extra of that white around the edges, doing a little dry brush over the antique Waverly wax. And to finish it up, I'm going to take some of this Super Gloss by Mod Podge. Now, for those of you that are like me and are not familiar with resin, but you want that extra kick to your piece, check out how amazing this looks. And mind the fact that I'm using a teeny tiny tree, okay? Yes, this ornament would absolutely look better on a much bigger tree, but for display purposes, you get the idea. Show you how you can take little wine cork bottle lights and shove in the top of these so you can make your decoupage ornament glow. This is just one of the Dollar Tree ornaments that we're going to be using for this project. You'll notice if you take the cork light and you place it in here that it doesn't necessarily fit. It's a little bit wonky and it's not going to be stable at all. So we want this to set in the top here just perfectly, and we're going to use some twine to do that. For anyone interested in purchasing these, I do have a link down in my Amazon store in the description box. And yes, there is a battery pack on here, so they can be replaced. Once we glue the twine and all that stuff on here, you'll notice we're not going to be able to get the battery out and replace anything. So keep that in mind while you're making these. If you want to be able to replace the batteries, then obviously glue these together differently than I'm about to show you. We need that twine to create that cork stopper effect. And to do that, I'm just going to take some and wrap it around right underneath the button, because we also need access to that button. Once I'm happy with it and I put it back into the ornament and I notice it stops, I'm just gluing everything down. I unraveled the lights and then started pushing them down inside of the ornament using a couple different little things. I didn't want all the lights just sitting in one corner in the bottom of the ornament. I wanted them to be spread out so everything had an even glow. In order to be able to hang our ornament, we're going to need to create that hanger effect. So I cut a couple inches of twine and then glued it down to each side, making sure it was able to fit in top of our ornament. If you put it together right, it should look like this. And we want to make sure that you don't wake up on Christmas morning with a bunch of decoupage ornaments on the floor So we're gonna grab some tacky glue, rub some around the top of that ornament, around the twine, around the hanger. Make sure we shove that sucker down in there real tight and put it off to the side to dry. Then it's time to pick you a napkin. I'm gonna be using this beauty that was sent to me from a subscriber that I had sitting off to the side. I was waiting for such an occasion. I'm gonna remove those sneaky layers on the back. Now my preferred method, there are several ways to do this, is just to tear a corner, it reveals the sneaky layers, and I just pull them apart. We're only going to be using the top layer for this. Then I took a minute to cut down the napkin. If you've never decoupaged anything that is round, it can be a pain for someone like me that's been doing this for years, let alone a beginner. So having too much excess to deal with to try and not get attached can be a pain. To attach the napkins, I'm just going to be using a fan brush and some good old Mod Podge. But first I decided to take some of my Waverly Snow White chalk paint and apply a layer onto the back of the ornament. I'm not going to put it on the front because then we won't be able to really see the glow from the fairy lights we put inside. And people, if you want to decoupage the whole ornament, you go right ahead. Truth be told, I was being lazy and I was like, nope, we're not doing both sides. It's been my experience that when we're blending a piece, sharp edges don't really give that effect. So I'm going to take a little bit of water and just spray around the edge of the napkin. Don't oversaturate it because you will destroy it. And then just break, creating a little bit of a tear. This is going to allow our napkin to just blend into the color that we painted around the edges. Keep in mind, you might have to tear more of the napkin once you get this applied on here. Just having it torn already in certain sections just helps give you a head start in the event that some pieces line up perfectly. Whenever I'm doing ornaments like this, I find it best if I just pick the center of the area and then put a decent amount of Mod Podge around where I want the piece to go. I never really go all the way to the edges. This way it allows me the ability to come and fix it as we're blending it to the side to help reduce any excess wrinkles. You'll see here I'm using a little bit of water to remove the excess paper and taking the cling wrap to help smooth it around as I'm applying more Mod Podge and just attaching everything. I allowed that to dry and then came on in with the white paint and tappity tap tap tapped all around the seams where the napkin met the back, just blending everything in. Use whatever sealer you would like for your piece. I just took some Mod Podge and went over the whole ornament. I grabbed my Dixie Belle silver gilding wax and went ham on the little cork piece. Really did not like the color of it. It felt like it stuck out like a sore thumb with our beautiful ornament and felt like that silver really helped bring this piece together. On a recent trip to Dollar Tree, I seen these letter ornaments with the Santa hat, and I had a really awesome idea to use them not just as ornaments, but as decor. To do that, we're going to decoupage this piece. We're going to need to create a base, and you can use a chalk paint or a multi-surface. Really is up to you, but I highly recommend using one of these two on a surface like this. Giving it a nice white background is just going to allow whatever you're decoupaging onto the piece for the design to pop. I decided to go ahead and use the Waverly Snow White chalk paint. I want to use the iron-on method on this piece, so I'm going to put a nice healthy layer of Mod Podge right on the top and then let that dry naturally for about 3 to 4 hours. I know, people, I hate waiting too, okay? But it's been my experience that it just ends up best if we let it dry naturally. Make sure that your piece looks nice, thick, and juicy like this with Mod Podge everywhere, and then set it to the side. When it's dry, pick you out a napkin and then get rid of all the sneaky layers. We're just going to use that top decorative layer and we're going to cut that piece down to fit right over top of our letter. Now it's time to bring on in our iron. This is the iron that I like to use. I usually just keep this little joint right next to my craft station, turn it all the way up, let it heat up, and then I will grab some parchment paper. You want to use parchment paper, not wax paper. Parchment paper is for heat. Make sure everything's in place. Pick a side and iron from one side to the next. When you're sure that you've attached everything, take a second and just look over the piece. Make sure everything is connected all around the edges. Now it's time to get rid of all the excess, and usually I sand that off. But for entertainment value today, mine the light were in the garage, but I know I got some little pyros in here, and y'all love to see me do randomness with my crafting, so here we go. Fire, fire. Ooh, ooh. You can absolutely sand this off, but I decoupage so much and I rarely ever do this because I scare myself. But it does work. The M is for Mama, which is the nickname that I call my mom. She told me I could decorate her house for Christmas as long as it had blue in it. So when I seen this ornament, I thought this would be absolutely a perfect little way to add a little something into one of her kitchen shelves. Dollar Tree's wood ornaments are always great for creating sets. I'm going to take 3 of these little tree wood ornaments and put a nice base coat for our decoupage. Helps to spread around the paint. Just add a little bit of water. You can skip that part if you want to. For this little set, we're going to be using this Nutcracker napkin. I'm going to remove those sneaky layers off the back. We're just going to be using this top decorative layer, and then I'm going to take a little bit of water on the end of a paintbrush and trim out each nutcracker so we can put one on each tree. Since the napkin's background is white, it blended in perfectly with these trees. Took some gold and added around the edges and our star and a little green bow right on the top for accent. If you have some beat up paint sticks laying around that you have used for one thing or another, don't throw those suckers away. Instead, let's bring on in the miter shears and cut them suckers down, create some decoupage ornaments out of them. You can obviously make these as big as you would like. I decided just to pretty much cut mine in half and get 2 out of this paint stick. Next, I grabbed my Snow White Waverly chalk paint and gave these little paint sticks a nice coat of paint on the front and the back. For the decoupage portion of these ornaments, I wanted an accent and a solid piece. So I cut out just a tiny portion, made sure to just have that top decorative layer, and then added these on just to the tips of the paint sticks. Next, I grabbed some TDS dry rub on transfers and cut out little sections that I wanted to put on our ornaments. If you don't want to use transfers, but you like this idea, you could find napkins that have little words or have little patterns that you would like to decoupage onto these, or grab you a stencil and add the stencil design. A stamp would work as well. I took my drill and added some holes, and I absolutely love how this old paint stick turned out. Of all the wood ornaments that I can pick up at Dollar Tree, these snowmen are my favorite to grab and create little unique sets with. We're going to give them a nice coat of Waverly Snow White chalk paint for a base for the decoupage and allow that to dry. I'm going rustic with this set, and I grabbed some TDS A4 rice paper and cut down a couple sections to apply onto our snowmen. I used some Mod Podge for the medium, allowed these to dry, and then sanded off the excess on one, and I used the burn method on the other. I wanted to give a side-by-side comparison to those who aren't sure what they like, so you can see how basically the burn method allows for that crisp, dark outside layer, while the one that we sanded does not have that. I added a little scarf to one and left the other one just as it is, and I love how this set turned out. I ordered this giant pack of wood slices off of Amazon. I do have it linked down in my Amazon affiliate link in the description box for anyone that's interested. We're going to create a couple little dome pieces, little dome ornaments. These are just ornament halves. You see the little hole? Yeah, I'm faking it, okay? They aren't the actual dome piece, just in case you're wondering. For this rustic ornament, we're gonna be using a piece of A4 TDS rice paper, and we're going to put a little bit of water on a paintbrush and just trim out the section that we want to go onto our ornament. You can use scissors and cut yours down if you'd like. I personally find that it blends better if it's torn. For the medium, I'm just going to use some Mod Podge, and then I'm taking our little section and spritzing it with a little bit of water. I find that if I wet the rice paper, it tends to go on really flawlessly with minimal wrinkles. I nipped the tip of our little plastic ornament there so it wasn't hanging off and looking awkward on our pretty little rustic piece that we're creating. And then I took some antique wax and trimmed up around the edges, making sure it looked really nice. And then I grabbed our messy little snow bits that I had in my stash. I picked this up, I think, probably 2 years ago from Dollar Tree. That's how little I use this stuff. Now, I find that gluing the plastic piece down around the outside is definitely better than getting that glue on the inside, because some of those little white bits will stick to the ceiling of your ornament. For this little dome ornament, we're going to use a beautiful napkin that has a really pretty scenery, and we're going to paint this background white. I tore out the little section of our napkin that I wanted to put on this ornament, and then removed the little sneaky layers from the top decorative layer. I then grabbed my Mod Podge and put a little bit down over top of the white paint and applied our napkin. I shook some of Dollar Tree's faux snow bits into our little clear dome piece, a little too many bits, and then I had to attach on our rustic little ornaments. I used some of Type Bonds, quick and thick, to paint around the edges, allowed it to dry, and I love this piece so much. I'm really loving the gingerbread theme this year, so I took a couple cutouts from my TDS Rice Paper and applied some Mod Podge to these rustic little ornaments, creating an adorable set. Whenever you're creating ornaments, they don't always have to be Christmassy. As a matter of fact, grab whatever type of napkin, whatever type of tissue paper, and grab as many ornaments. You can take that one napkin and create a cohesive collection with as many pieces as you would like. Just pick a medium, attach your pieces, and then decorate your tree. This is one of the large colored ornaments from Dollar Tree. We're just going to remove this piece off the top. Oops. And then we're going to bust out the clay molds. Really not sure what molds I want to use, so I just grabbed a couple of them. Use whatever type of clay you would like. I'm using paper clay. That's one of my favorite clays, and I'm just pressing it down into these border molds. I get most of my molds off of Amazon for anyone that is interested, and I used our Type Bond Quick and Thick here to attach the clay pieces. This can be really tedious if you have the smaller ornaments and you're trying to do that on those. I have done that before with those, and I figured let's get us a big ornament because we're going to get artsy fartsy with this decoupage piece, and I really wanted to have some room to play with on this ornament. I used 2 different molds to create 2 different borders, so we had 4 total, and I just trimmed the clay down to size, and then I added some leaves around the top. I recommend letting this dry overnight before you start to paint your piece. You could paint it beforehand. You could go about this several different ways. This is just how I decided to tackle this. There really isn't no right or wrong way. It just depends on the way that you want your art done. I'm using 2 different color greens. When I'm doing a piece like this, I like to have a variation of different colors. I feel like it just kind of brings it to life, along with allowing different sections to pop. I use those green colors to color in the leaves along with the border pieces that we attached. I don't want to decoupage right onto this silky plastic, so I'm using a creamy chalk paint to paint right here in the center. Normally I'd use a pouncer for something like this, but because it's such a small area, I just use a detail brush to make sure I didn't go too much over the green sections that I had painted. Once your piece is completely dry, then it's time to decoupage. I cut out 4 different sections from my TDS Decoupage tissue paper. I'm going to use just a little bit of Mod Podge and spray a little bit of water onto the back of these little sections and gingerly apply. I'm not going for perfect here. If I was, I'd cut little slits in the side to make sure they evenly molded around our ornaments. Instead, I'm going for that vintage look. You remember back in the day, well, it depends on your age, you could go over to your grandparents and they had these big old Christmas bulbs around their tree, and they were so vintage and so pretty, and my grandmother always had tinsel on her tree, and that's really what inspired this whole ornament, is just that vintage vibe. I don't always get the opportunity to get extremely artsy with my decoupage, but it's truly my happy place. When I'm sitting and decoupaging something, everything else just fades away and my heart just fills with joy. I hope you all truly enjoy this piece. Once I had everything put on this ornament, I took that green and smooshed around the edges, blending it together, and then added a little bit of gilding wax to the edges to make everything just pop and look cohesive. If you're looking for more decoupage ornament inspiration, check out this video right here. And as always, people, thank you all so much for hanging out with me today, and until next time, bye!